Welcome back. It's Tim and Julie Harrison. This is Real Estate Coaching Radio. And this is your warning, by the way. This is our Friday show. So we don't necessarily talk about real estate coaching or training. We talk
Although
about
it does sneak in, of
oh,
course.
exactly. But we do talk about whatever it is top of our minds. And now that I just said that, the first thing that's top of my mind is having had some coaching calls this week. I have had some very interesting experiences, and we have no structure, we have no outline. But Julie does have
I'm
some
warned.
talking points, which are really hilarious. So yeah, this is the Friday show, and I do want to start out by congratulating all of my personal elite coaching clients, Julie. A lot of them, I
Mm,
would say half of them haven't been with me for that long, and they are doing
yep.
so good getting together with the pre-listing pack, going on listing
Mhm.
appointments, learning how to do price reductions. It's just so, I don't know. I have to say, Julie, in the 30 years you and I have been working together, in the 34 years we've been married, the only, like, I do miss going on, if I think about all of our past
I know.
incarnations,
Me
I miss
too.
going on listing appointments. I do.
Yeah,
I do. I just do. I love
I know.
listing appointments. There's
Why do you think that is for our listeners that might be curious about that?
competition.
Yeah,
I
the
mean,
winning of it.
well, I like going on listing appointments where I didn't have a real connection with the seller in terms of like, there weren't a center of influence and past client. There weren't like an easy one,
Right. It
where I
was
could
a
just walk
competitive
in.
one.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I wanted to go on a competitive listing appointments, and you and I were almost always competing with really fantastic agents, especially in New
Mhm.
Albany. And
Yep.
so I loved going on competitive listing appointments in New Albany because you had to be frosty, paying attention the whole
Mhm.
time. And if you weren't, you were gonna something was gonna get by you. And what was really cool is that because we would often compete with the same agents, they would sort of know our jib jab, but we were still able to compete with them and win on a fairly regular basis when we both had the same disadvantages. Like for example, if it was a referral or center of influence and past client, and we are competing against other great agents, we were almost always going to get it. But
Mhm.
where we would sometimes not get it is if, for example, that other great agent was, being interviewed by the same seller as we were, and that seller happens to have, weekly tennis matches with that other agent or something like
Right.
that.
The pull of the center of influence relationship is strong, no matter what side you're on. Yeah, that's
But that
definitely
is,
something.
but the clients that I have now, and I'm thinking of you, Jeff and Celeste, a lot of a lot of these clients are really great people, really great clients, really great potential. I mean, really just fantastic, wonderful people. But just for them to grow their businesses, they have to work outside of their centers of influence and past clients. They have to start learning how to be competitive. And that's where a lot of the
That's right.
clients that I'm getting now as an elite coach, that's where I'm getting. I'm getting a lot of folks that have sort of rounded the bend on what they're going to get from their center of influence and past clients because your immediate center of influence and past client, that's where the power is. But as you try to grow that list, which you should always be trying to do, you're going to
Yep.
start diluting the essentially the effectiveness of center of influence and past client marketing. We always want you to focus on that primarily. But again, once you get past your core group, and then now you're getting a first degree or referral from somebody who you go to church with, right? Okay, that's probably effective. But then as you further push out, the nature of the relationship and the stickiness and I don't know how else to say it, it definitely starts to wane. And so you end up going on a listing appointment that maybe you could source back to your center of influence and past client. But because it's so many degrees out from really your core group of people, it's you're just basically competing. And you're competing as if you were
Sure.
just an agent who just sent them a postcard. And that's what a lot of these centers of influence and past client agents have learned the hard way. Well, it was a referral from somebody who was a referral from somebody. And then they have taken that for granted because, and they find out a lot of times the hard way that they didn't actually have the skill set that they thought they had. And that's the reason they come
Yep.
to us to learn how to be competitive. And I do love those coaching calls. Honestly, it charges me up. It just does.
Well, that's right. And I would agree with that, that for a lot of agents that have the basics sorted out, they can present, they know how to pre-qualify, they've got the basic gist. But if all you've really ever gone on are people who already know, love, and trust you, and you've gotten to a certain point, which might be a really great point.
For
You might
sure.
be fantastic. You could be doing 20, 30, 40 million a year in volume, and that's great, but you get stuck because you've exhausted all of that past client center of influence mojo. And you recognize now that to get to the next level, you're going to have to compete and go after things that aren't just coming to you because they come to you because of who you are. And that's, I think what you miss, what you're talking about when we were competing in New Albany, that's a great test of your skill. It forces you to have to be better than maybe you would have been if you were only dependent on the sphere.
Well, it's the levels of learning, Juliet. Again, I talked
Yes.
about this with two different clients, but it goes unconscious incompetence. See if I get this right.
Hmm.
Unconscious incompetence, conscious incompetence, conscious competence, and then unconscious competence. Ha, I got it right.
Ah, you did it.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right.
Well
So,
done.
the bottom line is that the best coaching clients that are coming to us aren't the ones that are consciously or unconsciously incompetent. That's the phase. It's called levels of learning. You guys can Google it. I think Maslow created this. And any of
Hmm.
that, if you were to research that first level, that's where a lot of agents and people in general, they don't know what they don't know. And
Right.
they don't know that they need a listing presentation, learn how to pre-qualify. They don't know anything, but what they don't know is hurting them because and then what
Hmm.
they'll then find out is that they continuously fail and they don't know why. And then eventually what happens is frankly the smarter of the lot will go right to okay, I acknowledge I've had this problem. I don't need to suffer from this level of failure time in and time. You, for example, maybe
Yeah.
you go on 10 listing appointments and you only take 3 of them. And then you say, you know what, this doesn't make any sense. Why am I not taking all 10? If some of you, it's going to take that level of loss, frankly, before you actually have the epiphany that you move on to the next level, which is where you're consciously incompetent. I know now that I don't know what I hope to know in order for me to accomplish my goals. And those are the best coaching clients. But really,
100%. Yep.
a lot of the ones I'm getting as elite coaching clients, Julie, are the ones that are consciously competent, where they know that they're good. Like I was just talking to you
Yeah.
about Jeff and Celeste, they're definitely good.
Sure.
But they know, like I asked Celeste today, sorry for talking about you so much, Celeste. I asked Celeste today, what did she think her level of competence was with regards to just scripts? And I've role played with her, and I'm telling you, her
Hmm.
jib jab's good, better than most other agents out there for sure. But she gave herself a lower score than I gave her. She said 5 or 6. I think she's more like a 6 or 7. But with that extra little, I don't know, work, the extra little, frankly,
It's the last
professionalism.
degree that makes the water boil.
Exactly. Thank you. Exactly. And that's what she's missing. And as soon as Celeste has that, because conceptually, intellectually, she knows how to have a conversation with somebody. Like the most of real estate, when you're dealing with sellers, a lot of times it's getting them to do what they don't want to do when they don't want to do it at the highest
For
level. I mean,
sure.
that's and they're in a market that's it's arguably a buyer's market. So they're having to deal with sellers that have COVID pricing expectations,
Hmm.
and the market's not willing to pay it. So they have to have these conversations with folks about price. And this is what's exciting about that. All of them have monster equity. So they've got the room to lower the price. It's not an upside down situation. Many of them have.
Very fortunately, because it's not always like that. But yes.
Right. And by the way, let's talk about your article. Most of them have at least
Mm.
50% equity in their homes. It's pretty spectacular. So there's room to lower the price. But what's lacking in her market is the skill of the listing agents to get the price down. And many of them are finding that out the hard way because they're losing the listings, which goes to what we talked to you guys about this constantly in the past weeks of podcasts. Expired listings, gold mine, because a
Mhm.
lot of sellers have to sell sellers. They have lots of equity, and you just have to get them relisted and reposition the houses on the market so that they correctly reflect the buyer's expectations. And when you do that, you're going to have an avalanche of listings sell. And that's what I'm starting to see from my expired or from my well, my elite coaching clients that have learned how to hunt expireds. They're,
Yeah.
they're taking listings that were expired from other agents, and having them on the market, and the other agents had them expire after 6 months in many cases. They're getting them for sale again, and they're getting them sold and closing within 60 days, just because they are learning how to have professional conversations with sellers about how to position the houses on the market so they correctly reflect the buyer's expectations. And here's the thing that's really
Mhm.
interesting. And I would say 50% of the time, the reason the house didn't sell wasn't because of the price. It was other things that we're going over in elite coaching. Anyway,
Mhm.
so you asked me why I missed expire or going on listing appointment.
Sure.
It is the win, honestly.
It's the win.
But I
And
get the
it's
win.
knowing that your skills won out and also the confidence that you're the right person to help that client accomplish their needs. That is fulfilling.
It is totally. Exactly. But Julie, that's it. I get that. It charges me up because I get that sense of winning vicariously through all
Oh
these
yeah, we
great
live
coaches.
vicariously through their wins for
We
sure.
do, so it's like they're paying me to coach them, but I'm like, okay, tell me more about that expired, or tell me more about that listing appointment. Tell me more about what they said and what did you say? And it's exciting. I
Yeah,
don't
but you know what? Because I have a lot of expired hunters in my schedule as well. And one of the most common, and it's funny because our coaching clients are like, how can that be? There's so many times that I hear that on a coaching call. They're like, I think John Walkinshaw told me today, he's a broker up in Canada, one of the top EXP brokers in Canada. And he said he calls people back from sign calls and home brochure calls and all that, like within 5 minutes or less. He's like, I can't believe how many times somebody says, are you AI? Or who are you? Why are you calling me? And he's like, how do agents not know to call somebody back when somebody leaves them a message like right away? And I told him, well, that's job security as coaches, because there's always going to be agents that are lazy.
Well, I mean, Julie and I are some of the top EXP sponsors at EXP Realty. And when I'm not going to give you guys an EXP pitch other than what I just said. So, I direct people on the podcast and everywhere else that if you're interested in joining EXP Realty and you're ready to choose a sponsor, we're formally applying for the job of being your EXP Realty sponsors. And then I say, text me at 512-758-0206, and the links are down below. All right. That's what I say. You guys have heard me say it a million times. Many of you, thousands of you joined with us at EXP Realty. But I still have people that text me and assume that I'm AI. And I had one guy get aggressive with me, and I'm on a Zoom. It's a big Zoom, so I'm not the one that's hosting it. I'm just attending. And this guy's like getting aggressive with me, insisting that it's not really me, that it's AI. And I'm thinking to myself as I'm texting back and forth with this guy, listen, brother, I promise you it's me. But if there is anybody that creates AI that's as good enough, that can replace me having conversations with people like you that don't like to listen, I'm going to sign up and use it.
They're hired.
Totally.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So when
Totally
when you guys text us, it's, and me for about EXP, it's definitely me. And if you're just wanting to learn more about EXP Realty, there's a link below to learn more about our EXP Realty group. So Julie Harris, I want to congratulate you.
Oh, why is that?
You had a great article that has gone, as the kids like to say, viral. Boy, nothing makes me look older than saying the kids like to say, and then doing air quotes, right? Air quotes. I mean, I think the 1990s, once it's hand gestures back, in any event. Yes, on Housing Wire, and it's now showing up in other places on the internet. And you guys are listeners every day and viewers to our channel, so you know what I'm about to share with you. It's the one where Julie and I are, it's a drill down on why we're very much believing 100% at this point, not 99%, no waffling. We know it's true that we're at the very beginning stages of a 25-year housing boom, and all of you guys are in the right place at the right time. You've been hearing this, and I knew the rest of the industry wasn't paying attention. They're not paying attention to the facts. They're not paying attention to what's happening with all the things that we talk about every day on this podcast that, frankly, I'm glad that the rest of the industry isn't paying attention to it at this point, because it's not up to them as an industry to necessarily be paying attention to the things that we pay attention to. That's what makes us unique. Most times when agents listen to podcasts and go to YouTube channels, they want lead generation. And we give you guys all that as well. But where we are different is we take the time to not just take care of what's going to happen to you on your next steps. We're paying attention to what's going to happen to you 6 months, 12 months, or 24 months from now. Julie and I are looking for macro trends. We're looking for where the opportunity is going to be in the future for you. And when we started about 2 years ago, when we started seeing all these things that we were seeing one after another, which was leading us to believe that we were beginning stages of a 25-year housing boom. And then frankly, when the administration changed over and we saw President Trump now releasing Fannie Freddie from conservatorship, we saw the new program that he announced this week, called Make Housing, what is it? Save American Housing or whatever it is. We've heard him say make housing great again and all these other things. All of this is reinforcing what we knew was going to happen. And we're going to do a whole podcast about this. But if you haven't read that article on Housing Wire, it's making its way all over the internet. Make sure you read it, or just listen to our past podcasts.
I think the title is the 25-year housing surge, why it's just getting started, something like that.
Yeah, and it is just getting started. And over the next, and I have to say, I'm proud of us because we got it right. We really, really got it right. We knew into fourth quarters when all these announcements would be happening. And I can't believe that we are that accurate with a lot of the things that we'd predicted. There's a couple of things.
It was a lot of work, I mean, this was a collaboration between you and I. You had the initial, highline bullet points and headlines, and then I did a lot of research and made sure that what you and I were believing, we make sure we didn't have confirmation bias, because we're naturally enthusiastic people and coaches. And so we put some numbers behind it, some stats, some facts, so that we're not just saying, hey, you know what, things are going to come roaring back because of demographics. Well, what does that even mean? Anybody can say that, because here are some specific, very studied and detailed demographics that prove the point. So I think it's great for our listeners. I'm glad that you mentioned that, because I do want them to have that article printed off, use it as talking points. Some of them could be used as objection handlers to people that say, I'm going to wait for the market to crash. Well, good luck waiting. You know, people said that in 1978. They're going to wait for rates to come down, and rates didn't come down until like 1984 or something like that. So if that's going to be your stance, then get ready to wait. But better than that, educate your prospects, educate your clients, your friends, people. You guys are going to go to parties this weekend. You're going to go to kid parent meetings and things like that. And you're going to hear people say stuff that just doesn't make sense to you because you just put a house in contract, because you just took on 3 new listings, because things are happening out there. But be able to talk about that. That's why we did the podcast series as well as that Housing Wire article. And I was really happy that they picked that up, because now it's got even more legs.
Well, so what we're trying to express to you guys is that we do leave it all in the field for all of you to make sure that we're looking, downfield for you, downrange for you, for my military friends. And we're always paying attention to what might be coming around the corner. And what we've seen happen really in the last 6 months with regards to housing, with regards to some of our theories, and I would say Julie said it right, we weren't 100% confident because we are naturally optimistic and we do have confirmation bias. I mean, how can we not? But now that we've seen all of these different leaks come out about, and just overt tweets and X's and truths or whatever you call those things, we're really sure that we are at the beginning stages of what's going to be a huge housing boom. And I'm just going to touch a little bit on this, and then Julie, I want to get some of your fun points. Okay.
Okay.
There is so much that we've learned doing this research for you all over the last 18 months, really, but mostly in the last year, that I didn't even know about. And it's been, I think, exciting for me to learn how really ignorant I was about the different things about mortgage payments. And when Julie and I started getting into what are the actual components, what are the overt costs that make up an APR, what are the hidden costs? Well, let's talk about PMI. Why is this charge? Why is this fee? We were shocked how unbelievably difficult it was to even find out what the hidden components were. The little, I'm just going to say what my mind is telling me. I'm not saying this is right. This is how I will define it. How all the little scammy carve-outs that everyone who's has a mortgage has been paying for involuntarily with no disclosure. In the number of garbage fees, scammy little garbage fees that are packed into mortgage payments, it's extraordinary. And
it's not just that. There's 2 places that they're packed in. One is your closing statement itself, your closing costs. That has a lot of stuff baked into it that doesn't necessarily have to be there. And then number 2 is what you were saying, which is the thing that you keep on paying with your mortgage payments, with things that are baked into that. So yeah, I think that we're going to spin out a specific podcast and maybe an article that drills down even more on those things. I mean, here's how I look at it. The fact that you have to be sent a truth in, there's the air quotes again, a truth in lending statement prior to being allowed to close, and then you get your closing statement, that tells you that there's all this other junk going on.
But Julie, the truth in lending statement didn't disclose.
It doesn't even cover all of it.
It doesn't even cover all of it.
I know.
And so I was like, when I came across this information and I started firing up all the AIs and researching and asking people, the people I asked didn't even know about it. So we disclosed all this on the past podcast, or I'd said, I won't say disclosed, but we definitely shone light on it. All the little garbage fees that are being packed into your freaking interest rate. So what your actual interest rate would be if we pulled out all these garbage fees. I found a fee that was like $7 or $8 a month. But there's a taxes charged on that fee that's going to some little carve out inside the government. You heard me right. And we found mountains of things like that. PMI, explain PMI to me. You're paying to insure, I mean, explain it, right? Why are you paying it, Mr. Consumer?
And where's the math from that come from? Why is it as much as it is? What's that based on?
Okay, let's even talk, since we're, if you look at, for example, the credit scoring system that's been in place forever and nobody questions it. That's the part that I guess I'm kind of mesmerized by, how everyone has just been so complacent and passive about all this as more and more systems were put in place that weaseled money out of people. So if you want to know why housing isn't affordable, it's not affordable. Okay. Sorry, I can't stop myself from the air quotes.
It's a
It,
theme now.
you're right. It's not the price. Stop saying that. It's the payment.
Yeah.
And then if we all agree that nobody cares the prices as long as they can afford the payment, just for
Of
the
course.
sake
Otherwise,
of
cars wouldn't cost what they do.
exactly. How about this? That's the reason college wouldn't cost what it does. Right. So
Absolutely.
right. So then if you look at where the components of the payment come in, and then you really dissect it, when you go past the first layer, which is the truth of lending, and you try to go past that, it is almost impossible to find any information on that. And Julie
Mhm.
and I then found what the terms were. And then we found out what their little codes were. And then we started doing more and more homework on it. And that's where we started finding the potluck of really garbage fees. So point is that I'm going to say a word that's going to trigger some of you. Move past it. The
You
Trump
warned them.
administration, right? The Trump administration is rooting all of those out. By the way, that's where we found out some of these,
Mhm.
researching what they were talking about. We then said, what the hell is that fee? I've never heard of that before. And then they would, disclose, well, we're going to get rid of this one. We're going to get rid of this one. But I'll tell you what I think the biggest scam was of all of them. And I reserve my right to update this, the credit scoring thing. A
Oh,
huge
yeah.
scam.
Mhm.
So you have to pay a lot of money, sometimes multiple times, to have your credit pulled. And they were using this cryptic, opaque, antiquated system. And Julie, you talk about ratios. That's worth talking about.
Mhm.
To score whether or not someone got a mortgage, and if they got a mortgage, what their rate was going to be, and if they got a mortgage and the rate was okay, what their down payment was going to be. Well, why wouldn't you only sort of knew how that was going about and how that was figured, but what you never really what you didn't connect was who wants on the lending side the rate to be lower. That would be nobody. So the credit scoring agencies had an incentive structure in place. And I know people are going to raise their eyebrows when I say this, but it has to be true. They had an incentive structure in place to make it so that the credit score that most people had set them up to have a higher interest rate, which
And
ultimately
pay points at closing.
exactly. So the
Yeah.
system was set up so the incentive structures were to make it so that
Yeah.
people were having to be forced to pay more. And what did the Trump administration do? They got rid of that whole, I think it was FICO, and they replaced it with a new one. And like they said, I think it was 30,000 and may have been 300,000. I don't
No, I think
remember.
it was 300,000 more borrowers will qualify. And
Okay.
I don't
Oh,
think they got rid of FICO altogether. I think that they're just using additional measures where you can, count real things like your rent payment being paid on time
well,
and your
also that
utilities and things like that.
you weren't able to count with the old credit scoring systems. You weren't able to count, for example, if you had, like most people have multiple sources of income, and maybe
Right.
it's because they're driving an Uber. I don't know. Those things didn't
Hmm.
count. So
It
you weren't
wasn't the
allowed
full picture.
the
And
whole.
it wasn't very transparent at all. Most people think that your credit score, which we're all a slave to, let's be honest. How many decisions are made based on your credit score? That's based on making your payments on time. And that is part of it. But did you know that's only about 20% of your credit score?
Well,
There's five things that go into your credit score.
but Julie, you said something. Let's make sure they drill down. Your insurance rates are your credit score. Whether you get a job, credit score. Whether you
Yep.
get a security rating, if you're going to work for the government, credit score. Whether I mean, I suppose, all kinds of things that we don't even know about, credit score. And the
Yep.
system itself was antiquated and frankly had so many different little, things that made no sense that the government just tossed it out. And they did make it so that the primary credit scoring vehicle, and I don't remember which one it's called. Julie's probably going to Google it for us and tell us the one company that they're going to go to. That's going to be what they're going to use primarily. And soon as, and then now, here's what people in the mass media said. Oh, Trump got rid of whatever it was. The system has been in place. They're all of a sudden going to start approving people with crappy credit. We're going to have another housing crash. That's not at all what they're doing. The credit score is now the elements that go into a credit score as to whether or not someone will qualify for a mortgage. They're now taking into like I was saying before, all the ways that people earn money, moving past the normal things that the old system was using. And Julie, what were the
It's
five
called
other
the
factors?
Vantage score.
There you
The
go.
Vantage score. And also, speaking of that trigger word, Trump and what he's doing to work, towards making housing great again. One of the new things that they've also done, and I think this has already been passed, is that they're removing past due medical bills from your credit, which for some people, we used the example of our friend Michelle a couple podcasts ago. For some people, that's 100% of why their credit was ruined is because they couldn't pay a medical bill that their insurance didn't cover. Now, is that their fault? It wasn't their fault. They had whatever accident or illness put them in that position in the first place. But you could ruin somebody's credit for life because they made late payments on some medical bill, which
Yeah.
is hard to make go away, by the way. They don't typically negotiate much on those things either.
And
So the new one is Vantage. I think they're using that in addition. And a lot of these changes are going to be happening. I think this is all going to be bundled up into the ongoing Make Housing Great Again, a lot of different things. And we're compiling a new article and a new series of podcasts that bundle all those things together. One of them is this change to how credit works. They're looking at, excuse me, maybe changing how ratios are handled to your point about payments, right? So the typical, I just looked it up to make sure that I had that straight. So just give me a second here. The typical ratios, you talk about debt to income or DTI ratio, right? That lenders prefer is below 30%, 36%. Most lenders will go up to 43%. Sometimes on FHA, you can get away with 50%. And so what they're calculating is how much of your income is servicing debt. Now, with housing prices going up, naturally the house payment's going to go up, but nobody's changed the acceptance level of that 36% for decades. So if somebody has all of their stuff paid off, and because they're in an expensive market, say they live in San Francisco or Miami or someplace.
Bro, where's
and
not, Julie, where's not?
everywhere's expensive now.
Exactly.
I mean, our cabin in Appalachia is expensive, right? And we're
Exactly.
not in any metro area to speak of for
No.
miles.
And I'm pretty
Okay,
sure we
so-
could have built that ourselves.
Exactly. So, but let's just say that to get something decent for you and your family, not even something luxury market, you're going to spend 750 grand. And maybe you have some student loans that are still lingering. Maybe you got a low balance on like a credit card or something. But basically, you're in good shape. So why should your ratio prevent you? Maybe your mortgage payment, because you're going to buy a house at that level and everything that's baked into it, the property taxes and all that, make your ratio 53%. Why should somebody that's in that position, and assuming that they have other, good credit and all the other things that go into it, why should that person not be allowed to qualify for either that level of house or a house at all because their ratio is off? So maybe there's, how lenders have overlays to punish you? Maybe there should be we would call them underlays or something like that, where if all of your other picture was okay, that you could have a higher ratio because you've shown your ability to be responsible, and because you're buying in an expensive market, that shouldn't punish you. So I think that's something, we talked a little bit about new construction regulations starting to go away. There's probably 20 or to 40 different things that are going to go into this Make Housing Great Again type of push for a new golden era of housing. And it's not just about price. And everybody says affordability. What goes into affordability? It's the payment. So, and that filters through to the builders. Maybe builders can start building houses and making more profit for themselves, making them build even more houses because it's profitable, because the regulations are not as onerous.
Well,
it only took 521 days to build the Empire State Building in the 30s. And that's a lot bigger than a house. So why does it take 8 months to build a house?
Well, you were telling me yesterday that you were part of a conversation with an economist that was guessing, because we're all trying to figure out what the elements of this are new, essentially effort going to be. And one of them was the builders right now are not going to be able to build affordable housing, right? I'm sitting on my hands so I don't do air quotes anymore. So they're not, so they can't do, because they don't make the costs too expensive. And so the building costs are too expensive, the land costs, the regulation costs, and all that crap. And so I did read the Trump administration said they're probably going to get rid of all tariffs on building supplies. So that's big.
That would help.
And then also the conversation you were telling about with the economist was guessing that there was going to be some kind of program to allow give incentives to the builders to build houses even at a loss. So
some kind of a builder subsidy or something like that.
Right. And that's probably what's going to have to happen in a lot of parts of the country so that folks can get back into buying homes again. We don't need to, guess as to if there was any sort of nefarious reason why some, group of overlords were trying to keep people from buying American homes. I think that's giving the group
No, I
of
don't think so.
overlords too much
Yeah.
credit. What really was happening is too many people for too long were passing too many rules, too much regulation. There are too many little carve outs. PMI is the best one ever as far as what the hell is
Yeah.
why am I paying all this, Mickey Mouse fees and all this stuff. And if you clear all that out and you take a fresh look at it and you free the sacred cows, right? And you
Hmm.
don't your constituents as a politician aren't the ones that are lining your pockets with the money that they're getting from PMI.
Yeah.
They're kicking into your reelection campaign or whatever. When you remove all of that, you can really get the monthly payment down without even touching the interest rate. Now, what I also think we're going to see is a big movement towards arms. There'll be some kind of a adjustable rate deal that's probably put in
Yeah.
place. Matter of fact, maybe the government's going to use some money to buy down the adjustable rate mortgage. I don't
Hmm.
know. We
Well,
definitely,
there's 11 states that are looking at abolishing property taxes. That would make a big difference. I mean, think of what it would do to our rental property income if we didn't
yeah.
have property tax on that. So, and maybe it's not for rentals, maybe it's just for, owner occupants, but even that would help people, right? That would help with your ratios. That would help with qualifying. That would help, you know, be able to, the affordability issue, right? So there's lots of things going on out there. And I think that this comes down to whatever you think about the current administration, the fact is that they are thinking out of the box. They're looking at some of these old issues that we've all become so accustomed to. Well, you're not going to buy a house unless you put 20% down. Maybe that's not true anymore. Maybe there's going to be a new program that is not subprime, but
Let's
you can
talk
do
about that.
5% down.
We have
Yeah.
Julie and I have a theory on this, and we're looking for breadcrumbs that would validate our theory. But this is our theory. We've not read this, and if you guys know anything we don't, give us a tip, would you please? Message us over on Instagram, Tim and Julie Harris. Just send us a direct message. But here's our theory. We think that there's going to be a public-private, program that's put in place where the public-private, let's just call it,
A
let's
partnership.
well, it's going to be a company that's going to
Mhm.
give you your down payment. The company is going to give you your down payment, and the company is then going to take a financial interest in the upside, the hypothetical profit of the sale of the house. The down payment money that they're going to contribute to you qualifying for the mortgage is not going to be in the form, you don't have to pay it back as a second mortgage. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying they're going to take strictly an equity interest and only get paid when you sell, and they're going to get paid a proportional amount of the profit based on the percent that they put in the house. I don't know how the
Yeah.
hypothetical, algorithm will work, but that's basically
Sure.
what we're thinking. We think because from a financial perspective, that actually makes sense. That's a good investment.
It does. They're investing in a housing future, basically.
Exactly. You're buying a housing future. You're buying a stock that doesn't pay dividends, basically. And the
And
only
if it doesn't appreciate, then you don't get your, there is some risk involved. But when you're investing, that's true of anything you're investing in.
But Jules and I think there's going to be somebody or somebody's that's going to put together a fund. Maybe it's going to be a new financial, widget where you can invest in, mortgage futures or home appreciation futures. It's kind of a good bet. And you're going to, something like that. And then some of these, and obviously, the sell or the owner who decides to partner with this entity is going to not have any financial burden from this partnership. And then when they go to sell it, it's just going to be a line item, whatever is getting paid back. This is what the original contribution was, 20 grand. They had
Mhm.
this portion of the down of the, equity. They're going to get paid this. That's how it's going to work. Or maybe they decide to keep the money with you and they roll it into the next one, the next one, and
Sure.
the next one. I would not be surprised. Matter of fact, I'll say at this point, I'll be surprised if something like that doesn't actually happen. And
Well,
then
again, thinking bigger, right? Thinking outside the box.
why isn't anyone in our real estate industry doing it? Why were Julie and I the first ones to write an article like that? Why are Julie and I the only ones that we know of that are actually saying the same thing, the things that we're saying? Why are we the only ones that are finding these things and sharing them with the industry? Because guys, the level of optimism and I don't know, excitement you should be feeling about this industry going forward, if you're completely not vibing with what I'm saying, listen to our past podcasts. And then I challenge you to find where we're wrong in our. Now, look, a year ago, we were just throwing spitballs. Now, some of our spitballs eventually got backed with facts, but now they're being validated by what we're seeing the government come out with. So you go and help us be better. If you find any flaws in our logic, tell us. We want to be
Or maybe something we haven't uncovered yet that's related to this topic, a breadcrumb to
exactly.
follow.
So
and validate or invalidate. Yeah.
this is absolutely what it feels like to be in the right place at the right time. And I cannot, when was the last time that the real estate industry built momentum into the new year? I, when? I can't think of.
That's very true. It's interesting you bring that up because I don't know if you've seen this with your coaching clients, or maybe going into next week, you'll see even more of this, but almost to a person, I've had comments that even though it's the time of year that it is, it's feeling more like a spring market. Like there was just this little bubbling up that things are getting hotter again. Things are selling. I've had several coaching clients that had listings that had lingered too long. They were looking at maybe their client's going to give up and try again next year. And something came together at the last minute, or they put it together themselves at the last minute. It does seem like we're on the edge of some momentum here, and I'm very excited about that.
So we just did 40 minutes talking about something we said we weren't going to talk about, just so you know, and
Oops.
housing. And it's totally my fault. But that is our audience. And hopefully you guys are vibing with what we're trying to express to you. Julie, do you have time to go through some of your Fun Friday points? Because a lot of people really actually like that. We actually have people that only listen to us on Friday.
All right, then. But I have about 20 minutes, I think.
All right,
Okay,
20
we'll do it
minutes.
quickly. Okay, so this is Fun Friday, even though maybe some of the stuff we just talked about wasn't all that fun, but it is still real. Okay, so on Fun Friday, we put down the spreadsheets, except for what you just listened to, maybe the comps and the contracts, and pick up curiosity. And it doesn't always have to be in real estate. So today we're buzzing with bees, hitching a ride on a comet, testing Beethoven's credentials as a cancer fighter, because that's been in the news, digging up a few ghosts of Jamestown, sipping condensed milk with Winnie-the-Pooh, and I have a second bear story, tipping our hats to Smokey Bear, this bear, on his big birthday. So think of this as your weekly detour, a roadside diner for your brain. Order up a slice of Wonder Pie and see where it takes us.
So Julie,
So
I have to give you credit where credit is due. You're really learning to master AI. Very good. I,
some of
I,
it's me, some of it's
I know.
enhanced
No.
me.
Well, do you really think having an AI writing assistant it
No,
takes.
I love it. It's great. I fought it in the beginning because it was, you have to kind of train it a little bit. But yeah, I love it. It's great. I'm writing more than I used to.
Yeah, me too. Totally. And which, maybe is a little overwhelming for some of our podcast listeners and our coaching clients. But it is
Sorry
what
for
it is.
them.
By the way, we are going over notes. And if you guys want these notes, make sure you subscribe to our daily newsletter, harrisrealestatedaily.com. The link is down below, or just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. That is really the insider's way of keeping in communication with Julie and I through our newsletter. So just go to harrisrealestatedaily.com. All right, Julie Harris, were you getting on to your first point?
Okay. So these are just little vignettes, little segments of things that I think are interesting. And, who knows where you can use these. But the first segment is number one. You guys can vote on what your favorite one is. Are you productive as a busy bee? We use that phrase all the time, right? People call themselves busy as a bee like it's a throwaway phrase. But what about these bees? They put us all to shame. Geoffrey Chaucer coined the phrase back in the 14th century, and for good reason. These little workers clock in at birth and they don't punch out until the end. Bees don't sit around and think about if they're going to do their work like we do in real estate sometimes. 1 tablespoon of honey, just one, is the result of 4,200 flower visits.
Wow.
One little bee's lifetime production, about 1/12 of a teaspoon. And about a third of the food that we eat comes thanks to their buzzing labor of what bees actually do. So let's take this into real estate. The productivity lesson here, it's not the frantic motion that counts, it's the steady, purposeful action. Bees don't try to make a gallon a day, they just do it. They just keep on showing up and doing the work. But it does make you wonder, are you working with the focus of a busy bee? Are you calling yourself a busy bee? Or are you being as productive as bees actually are? How about
So
that?
Julie's teeing me up to say what a lot of you longtime listeners will know I'm about to say, right? I know what
What's
you're doing.
that?
So
I
if
don't
you
know.
want ever increasing levels of
Oh, yeah.
success in your business and personal life, you have to do what you don't want to do when you don't want to do it at the highest level. And that was what it's not
Like
in
the
her
busy
notes.
bees do.
Yeah, but she was expecting me to say it. She knows I'm very predictable that way. And so a lot of you do as well. All right, Julie, point number 2, interstellar comet that stunned scientists.
All right. So there's been a lot of chatter about UFOs here and there. Not that we follow that and think it's interesting or anything, but uh,
No.
let's just say. So the real jaw dropper is called 31/Atlas. It's a comet from another star system. It's been caught cruising through our neighborhood this year. It's only the third truly interstellar object that's ever been confirmed. Early size guesses were about 12 miles wide, later refined down to a few miles wide, but still huge in cosmic terms. It's moving at 130,000 miles per hour, fast enough to make your head spin, just thinking about 130,000 miles per hour. Icy, dusty, it's got a glowing tail, the classic postcard from another solar system. And again, we've only seen 3 of these types of things in all of human history. It's like finding a message in a bottle from across the galaxy. So this should make you wonder what other things are traveling by too far for our telescopes, too fast for our eyes. And as Ferris Bueller famously said, and this is from me, life goes by pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. And and I wanted to mention I was thinking about what we are going to do today when I was walking Zoe to school. And I was thinking about this Ferris Bueller quote, life goes by pretty fast. If you don't stop and look around, you could miss it. We were just walking across the street and she looked down at her feet and there was about 7 baby chicks and a hen. And these were like these little cotton ball size, tiny, tiny little chicks. And she just stopped in her tracks and she's like, wow, they're so adorable. I hope they're going to be okay. Should we help them across the road? And, she was paying attention. I was like focused on getting her to school on time, crossing the road. She looks down and here's these tiny, tiny little adorable baby chicks. So, of course, I took a picture of that. But
So just a reminder, where Zoe goes to school here in Puerto Rico,
tons of chickens.
there are literally roosters and chickens that walk around outside. It's very common for people to have free range chickens. And eventually it turns out free range chickens don't stay in their area. They decide to,
make other chickens.
Now I want to tag on to your alien comment. So
Okay.
I was actually having this conversation with somebody this morning who is younger than me. And he was we were talking about just a ton of different topics. And he asked me how I have interest in so many different things. And I said, Julie and I do it intentionally because we know one of the best ways to keep your brain frosty as you get older and be interesting to other people is to be interested in a lot of different things, and to be in a lot of different things that forces your brain to have elasticity. So I explained to him that what we look for anything that we feel like, if you're coming across something, you read something, you hear something, and you think, oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, if your brain, if you found it somewhat interesting, maybe make a note of that and then drill down on it a little bit, research it. You might find it's Pandora's box of an enormous waste of time, or you might find it opens a whole new pathway for you that you'd never even considered. Teeing this up, if you guys aren't listening, now I'm not saying I probably listen to about 50% of Joe Rogan's podcasts, but there was a podcast that came up on September 3rd that you've been listening to. And I have to say, this was badass, how cool it is. And the one I'm talking about, it was on September 3rd, and I cannot pronounce this guy's to say his last name, but I'll get the first one right so you can find it easily. Ben Van Kirkwork or something like that. Here. Can you guys read that?
Kirkwick.
Okay,
Yeah.
there it is. Find that. Okay, why?
It was very fascinating.
Well, you tell him about it. You tell him about it.
Well, is it the guy, is Van Kirkwork, who was talking about lots of different things. I think I might be mixing up podcasts because we've listened to so much lately, but wasn't he he's talking about different things that are out there cosmically and maybe aliens,
Pyramids.
And maybe not, in the pyramids, and how the pyramids aren't what we think they are.
Right. So what he said they have discovered, and it's not theory or theoretical or we heard or, something myth. They've actually been able to discover and this is within recent, like why no one else is talking about this or why this isn't everywhere is crazy. But 10 stories down, 100 feet, they have discovered under one of the pyramids, I don't remember which one, a actual Tic Tac made out of what
they don't know what a Tic Tac is, maybe.
Okay. Who doesn't nowadays? These are our Friday people, Julie. They're weirdos just like us. So a Tic Tac is the shape of what a lot of people like when you catch when CBS News, trying to validate that I'm not that crazy. But when a major news outlet will talk about an alien video or a spaceship, UFO, whatever they call them.
Tic Tac shaped.
Tic Tac shaped.
In other words, it's like bigger than this, but flying like.
No, it's huge.
Skinny. It's a skinny ship.
Right. And they're metallic and color. And they're the things that are able to, do things that physics says can't be done in terms of movement in the air. Mm-hmm. You guys have probably paid attention to this. There was 60 Minutes, there's a story on this. I mean, even the previous Pope came out and said, if it turns out that the UFOs do exist and there's actual other, species of I guess humans, they're not humans, but whatever they are, that doesn't invalidate the belief about God because God created them as well. Anyway, interesting. So it turns out under one of these pyramids, and if Julie, you have access to your computer, why don't
Mhm.
you email real quick so we can give them a little bit more breadcrumbs because this is really incredible. They have now discovered that the pyramids were actually, or they're believing that the pyramids were created prior to the Egyptians, that the Egyptians did make pyramids, but the pyramids existed even going back further in history. And a lot of the historians don't want to validate that because then it screws up their timeline. Again, listen to this podcast. But what's really amazing is they actually have now, I don't know what the technology is that can look down in the ground 100 feet, but they've now absolutely said there's something down there and that the shape of a tic tac that is some sort of metal, some sort of maybe alloy that we have not yet, or we do not know how to determine what it is, how it got there, the whole thing. And so there's been all these crazy, I guess, crazy, right? Theories that the pyramids were some sort of transportation device or interstellar ways of going from one place in the universe or even another universe to another. And the other theory is that they were actually producers of energy somehow, right? Listen to
Well,
the podcast,
yeah, regardless, the point is that we don't actually know everything.
right?
You know, there's so many of these different things. I've got something else coming up along that line. So, are you ready for number three?
If you have time, yes.
Yes. Okay. So there was a headline that was intriguing to me because I kept on seeing it about, I think the headline said Beethoven's Fifth, when played, cures 30% of cancer cells. And being a musician in a previous life, I thought, well, that would be interesting, wouldn't it? Let's follow that breadcrumb. So the internet loves to say that Beethoven's Fifth kills cancer, but is that the truth? Not so much. A few cell cultures in labs showed mixed reactions when exposed to music, but it's definitely not a miracle cure. What does kill tumors with sound? Well, there are actual techniques. One's called histotripsy, focused ultrasound that shreds tumor tissue. And there's another thing called sonodynamic therapy, which is ultrasound plus a sensitizer drug that makes free radicals actually attack cancer cells. So, what's the deal with Beethoven? Well, it's music, but is it specifically killing cancer cells? No, that breadcrumb turned out to not be so true. But if Beethoven did have a medical specialty, it would be his mindset, not oncology. And, you know, this Fifth Symphony is still pretty amazing. So I wrote down a note. What's your favorite pre-appointment song? Because we know that music does have an effect. Maybe it doesn't, cure cancer, but it certainly has an effect. So that was segment number three.
All right. So before you go on to segment number four, considering what you just talked about, do you want to talk about the goats of Jamestown or you want to talk about the real
Oh,
bear behind Winnie the Pooh?
well, I won't read the whole thing about the ghosts of Jamestown. We'll make this a little shorter because
Okay.
there's something else I want to mention, another podcast about that.
Sure.
Number four, Ghosts of Jamestown. Four colonial leaders were recently unearthed. Okay, now Jamestown was around in 1607, England's first permanent colony, and that's important. Starvation, disease, uneasy alliances with indigenous people, it was life at the knife's edge. But archaeologists recently unearthed four graves under an old church, the one that Pocahontas married John Rolfe in. So that's just kind of a nerdy history fact. And you can read in the newsletter who these guys were. But here's the interesting thing. That led me to a totally different breadcrumb. I listened to this podcast this morning. There's a podcast I listened to called Everything Everywhere Daily. And the thing I listened to today was about the lost colony of Roanoke. Did you know, Tim, that before we were just talking about Jamestown being the first permanent colony, there were a whole bunch of earlier attempts,
There were.
even in like 1580 and 1585. And they've documented some of this, but that was a really long time ago, and not everything survives. But this podcast I listened to on Everything Everywhere Daily called "The Lost Colony of Roanoke." I think I can't remember the name of the island. There's a bunch of islands off of North and South Carolina, and one of these was near Roanoke.
Well, Julie, you're talking about Viking remains too. So there,
Well, in this case, it's not even as old as the Viking remains, which also have been uncovered nearby. But there is to this day an Indian tribe, and I can't remember the name of it. It's not like Mohawks or like the ones that you would think of or Cherokee off the top of your head. It's a smaller Indian tribe who they themselves claim English heritage.
Huh.
in their bloodline. And in fact, these are one of the first indigenous American tribes who actually had blue and gray eyes. So explain that. And so the theory was that that was a result of one of these very early colonies that didn't make it, moving on to try and probably, find something to eat and partnering with Indians instead of fighting the Indians. And so I thought that was really interesting. So that podcast is pretty fascinating. Everything Everywhere does a lot of kind of historical fun stuff.
I've been listening to something on the Aztecs. I've been studying the Aztecs more because a
Mhm.
lot of the research on that's been, or the things that we learned in school were wrong.
Sure.
But I'll end on a kind of a high funny note. So you
I'll
remember
save
that?
my bear stories for next time.
Do you remember that History Channel series? A lot of you guys have watched it, where I think it's history, where it's those guys that are on some island in the same area you were just telling, and they were digging for
Oh,
this
Oak
lost gold.
Island? Is it Oak
Oh,
Island?
what is it?
Oak Island?
Oak Island.
OAK?
All right. So can you do this faster than me? Because I think the big news
They
is,
actually found something, right?
no, I think they found the buried gold.
Yeah.
Yep. Oak Island treasure found.
Yeah,
Uh,
well, it certainly took them a lot of episodes to get there. Is that
okay,
what you're
but
talking?
now AI is telling me it's not true, so I don't know which is true.
Huh.
Huh. We'll have to research that. That'll be something either you guys can research and tell.
It's called The Curse of Oak Island. Let's see. Yeah, I'll follow that one maybe for next Friday's show. Because I heard that they found it finally too, but I didn't research it yet.
Yeah, well, there you go. But so the moral of the story is we find this stuff really interesting. And Julie, I've been sharing with you. So
Yeah.
the Smoky Mountains, and we have this little cabin that's up in the hill and somewhere in Appalachia. I couldn't even tell you on a map where it is. It's so isolated. But that whole Smoky Mountain area, they find artifacts that completely and totally boggle the brains of
Yeah.
the scientists that don't understand why that's there, how it actually came from, this part of the world to that part of the world. So
Hmm.
the thesis behind a lot of this, and this, you guys have maybe been exposed to all this, but it is really interesting, is there's actually history that happens before what we are educated to believe was the start of history. So it's
Sure.
believed that there was a more advanced version of humans that may have been, okay, this is crazy, but this is Friday, that may have been coexisting with aliens or whatever they called them back then,
Hmm.
and that they are now actually coming to find, these were just the theories, but now they're starting to find hard facts that are only explained if you essentially thread the needle. And you're realizing now that there was some sort of big colossal event that happened on the planet that did wipe out probably a good portion of humanity, which wasn't very many, by the way, back when this have happened. But there were reasons to believe that there were vastly superior, like I told you guys about the pyramids and all the rest of it.
Mhm.
Research
I
this
think this
yourself.
story was on Rogan as well. Didn't the same guy talk about
Oh yeah,
this?
Joe's all
Yeah.
up
Yeah.
about this. I mean, I've always been interested in this, but listening to Joe, he's really interested in it.
Mhm.
He's crazy about this stuff. But so why are we sharing all this with you? Because it's Friday, because it's fun, because we wanted to give you something else to think about other than just your next closing. But in the meantime, do also take into consideration that exploring these sort of like, these little fun mental side trips, it helps with your brain. It helps you makes you more interesting, makes it so you can talk about something else other than kids and the soccer game and
Well, you are the sum of all of your experiences and everything you've read and that you've seen and you've heard and followed. And, I was thinking about as I was writing this in the theme of being curious and looking into things that you don't think about on your mental hamster wheel all the time, as you said. And I was thinking about a book that, me and my dad are sharing some similar books that's kind of how our conversation goes these days. And we're reading one called The Art Thief, and it's about a lady that worked during World War II in the Parisian art museums. Her job was to catalog where everything was, who the artists were, what rooms they were in, what year, like she's an art historian, right? But she was Jewish. And so, how does somebody like her survive in Paris in World War II? And it follows her life story. It's not historical fiction, it's her actual, from her writings. And it's a new memoir, basically. And so I was thinking, well, how would somebody in real estate, for example, benefit from knowing about something that's so far off the menu of what you normally think about? Well, she's under a lot of stress. She has to think out of the box. She has to be very ingenious in what she does. She has to show up to work every day. She has to be versatile. So just because it's not in your real estate wheelhouse or your normal podcast series doesn't mean it doesn't have value to you. Sometimes the things that you read about it, how many times in coaching, Tim, do you think to yourself, oh, that experience I had, 15
All
years
the
ago or
time.
10 years ago or at the gym yesterday, I didn't know at the time that that was going to be valuable and I could share that with a coaching client. That's why I experienced that. It
Okay,
happens all
so
the time.
I have a perfect end for today's show, and I did tell you about
Okay.
this. You're going to have to help me remember which Nazi it was. Oh gosh,
Oh,
did Tim just say Nazi? Yes, he did. All right, so there was and I did get as far. I saw this on Instagram. By the way,
mhm.
Instagram's awesome for these little bits of useless information. Um,
I
you
do
have
get a
to
lot of ideas from
you
that.
have to
Yeah.
validate that it's real because AI is making a lot of
Yes.
garbagey crap. So this one I did. So there was a property that was for sale. I don't remember what European country it was. I'm thinking Spain, and it showed interior pictures of the house. It was an apartment, a condo,
That's right.
right?
I told my dad about this story too. I've got to follow that. Yeah.
Okay. So you so in
It was
the
either Goebbels or Goering or something, wasn't it?
I think it was Goebbels. Okay.
Yeah.
So anyway, pictures of the interior of this property, and boom, up on the wall above the couch was this picture that, what this painting. And it turns out there was somebody identified it. I'm guessing it was probably an AI bot identified it as a piece of art from this particular artist, the whole thing, and also one of the pieces of art that were stolen
That
from
was missing.
that was
Yes.
missing, but it was stolen by the Nazis because I think it was Goebbels or no, I think it was Goering. I don't
It was
remember. One of those two
one of the bad
was
guys.
in charge of basically trying to steal art from the rest of
Yes,
Europe because Hitler had ambitions of starting a
that's
grand,
right.
huge art museum in
And
Berlin.
it's still, there's a ton of it that's still missing.
Well, not this one, because it turns out that it was indeed one of these stolen pieces of art. And here it
Hmm.
was in a property listing up on the wall. And then obviously it's going to make its way back to the rightful owner's heirs. And I think that's a good place to end it because that's
Way
going
to
to,
land the plane about real estate related to all of our, Fun Friday types of things.
hey,
So yeah,
sister,
nice. Well done.
you and I are operating in this game at a conscious competence. So go
Yes.
us.
Plus,
How about that? See what I just did there
on
too?
that note,
Yeah, on that note. Well, you guys have a fantastic day. Have a great weekend. Go back and listen to some of the things about the predictions that we put out there and understand that even though some of the things we're predicting are happening 5 years, 10 years in the future, if you know that that's going to happen, start positioning yourself to take advantage of those opportunities. Because if there's ever being in the right place at the right time in the right industry, taking the right actions, you all are doing it. So go you. Have a fantastic weekend. Hello, thank you for having watched this video. Please remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel.
that's right. And don't forget to hit that like button, leave your comments and questions below, and we will get right back with you.
Thank you for watching this video. And remember to watch the next one. You're going to love that one.